Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Summoner Strategies, where we examine strategies and tactics in League of Legends. I am your host, Motaro. If you don't know what Summoner Strategies is about, this is a show where we examine and comment upon League of Legends gameplay. Rather than just provide a commentary on what is happening, I hope we can also learn something from what we are seeing. Now, this is episode number 1 of Summoner Strategies, and today will be a themed episode. We will be following a couple of players who are falling into the bad playstyle of autopiloting. Now, if you don't know exactly what autopiloting is, that is when a player starts to make mistakes, because he's not properly checking how the game is progressing around him, but is instead making a lot of decisions based on habit. For example, a player who, instead of changing his build to incorporate Mercury threads when the enemy team only has AP carries, builds Berserker's Greaves because it is his build. Or instead of helping out in a teamfight happening in the jungle, he stays in the lane farming because he's not paying attention to what is happening past himself. Now, let's head right into the very first game proper. Right, here we are at the loading screen of the very first game in a 3 vs 3 game on Twisted Treeline, with the purple team consisting of Cassiopeia, Talon, Darius, and the blue team consisting of Corki, Cho'Gath, and Katarina. Now, this very first episode will be about autopiloting, which is sort of a catch-all term for several different types of behavior, but they all have a certain number of things in common. Mostly when a player autopilot, it is because he simply fails to pay attention to what is happening in the game. When a player sort of acts as if he's a bot, that is usually because he's autopiloting. He's not changing his build to reflect the gameplay, he's not picking a character based on what the enemy is choosing, he is not moving in his lane in a way that shows that he's paying attention to what his teammates or the enemies are doing. He's sort of only focusing on the little thing that he's doing right now, and not the larger scope of the gameplay. Now this game starts off with a bit of a brush shenanigan with the two teams. Both of them seem to think that they are the stronger team and are itching for a fight, and we see that Talon pretty much drops instantly, almost, he gets away alive, but he pretty much gets picked down immediately by the focus fire of the entire enemy team. And while Katarina runs off to chase Talon, Cassiopeia and Darius get a kill on the enemy Cho'Gath. Corki escapes with very little health, and Katarina chases Cassiopeia after, but does not pick up the kill, retreats when she notices that they are quite too close to the tower. Now, this is a fairly standard opening, fairly standard opening fight in the jungles of a 3v3 lane. Very often fights break out around this area in the middle, and why shouldn't it? When the first version of Twisted Treeline was released, the altars opened at around 2 minutes, I believe, which made it very fortuitous to fight in the middle of the map very early on, because if you could kill the enemy team, you could take their altar very early in the game, and then your own. So I do believe that players still fighting in the middle of the map at this point is sort of a habit that has been picked up since then, but why not? You should always put pressure on the enemy team. Now we see that Katarina comes down to the bottom lane to gank, and while it's not that effective, it does scare the bottom lane away a bit from the farm. Now, one important thing to note is what was happening up top here, because if we check the vision of Cassiopeia at this point, she does the farming thing, she does the sort of picking up a bit, but she sees that Katarina leaves top lane to go down, but apparently did not warn her teammates because they do not react in time. Now, on the other hand, still on the purple team's vision, we can see that they can see the enemy head up here. They are heading up top, but Cassiopeia does not seem to have noticed. In fact, Katarina shows up, does a bit of pokey damage on her, and she fights back against her, and then Cho'Gath shows up. And because Cassiopeia did not realize that Cho'Gath was there, he takes quite a bit of punishment there and has to retreat to the tower. Just a little bit of early maneuvering in the game. It's not game changing, it's not really indicative of how the game is going to go, but it still gives us a bit of a precognitive warning about the mental state of both teams. Now, here is a fight happening bottom, with blue essentially tower diving in order to try and pick up the kill on both of the bottom laners. Darius tries to do the catch but quite fails. Katarina at the same time tries to kill off Cassiopeia, but Cassiopeia succeeds in killing off Katarina first with that incredible, not burst, but sustained DPS. Very nasty. Bottom lane at the moment seems to be 1-for-1 in the team fight that ensued, with blue team clearly being the aggressor, having pushed back the lane all the way to the tower, and Darius with that health is of course naturally afraid of engaging. Talon gets a bit too brave going after Shogath and gets beat back by Corki, and now both of the purple team's bottom laners are very injured. Talon picks up the kill on Shogath, but it gets picked off by Corki as well. So once again 1-for-1 on the bottom lane. Top lane, not a whole lot is going on. Cassiopeia is fighting off Katarina. Seems to be the aggressor. Katarina is a bit afraid to go closer, tries to poke with that attack, but of course Cassiopeia's poke is much worse than Katarina's. Now, autopiloting is the very first thing that I would like to bring up here on Summoner Strategies, because once you realize what it sort of looks like and how you can avoid it, you will immediately become a much better player in League of Legends. Now, in this game, the player who is autopiloting is Cassiopeia, on account that he is not really paying close attention to what is happening in the entire game. He's mostly focusing on himself. And he does actually do a rather good job himself. He harasses very nicely, he gets a good amount of creep farm, more than Katarina, I mean. But this happens a moment later. Here we see Shogath with very little health, Darius hiding at the tower. This will become important a little bit later. Cassiopeia is harassing Katarina very nicely, actually. In fact, we will see Cassiopeia kill Katarina in a few moments due to great harassment. There it hits, and Cassiopeia sees the opening, chases after Katarina, and Katarina will not be able to escape. In fact, with this very strange shun pull to the golem, which I believe must have been some kind of delayed mistake, he gets closer to Cassiopeia rather than further away and gets picked off. Now, this is the important point that happens here that sort of indicates that Cassiopeia is autopiloting. If we look down here, we see that Shogath is fleeing the team fight that occurred here, where Corki and Darius died, but now Talon is right after him, chasing him down. Of course, what should happen is that Cassiopeia immediately moves down somewhere, maybe through this brush if she's very brave and wants to get close to the tower, or tries to cut down at least there. Even that might give you a good chance of catching Shogath. In fact, the purple team pings Shogath to get her attention, but this Cassiopeia is not paying attention to the map properly and lets Shogath just plain walk right past, missing out on the kill. Now, this is one of the symptoms of autopiloting. This player is very focused on what he is doing and not really looking at what the rest of the team is doing. Now, there are many reasons why you might start autopiloting, why you might get into this tired mindset where you just don't want to pay attention to everything that is going on. For example, you may feel that if your enemy is losing the bottom lane, it's their fault and not yours. Well, you should still always keep in mind how can you try to help them. Even if they are strangers in a random game, there's usually something you can try to do to help your lane mates if they are failing their lane. You should always keep in mind where your teammates are and where your enemies are, just in case that someone is trying to gank someone and you have a chance of helping them. For example, here we see that the blue team is moving up to the middle and probably up here, but Cassiopeia again hasn't noticed what is happening. So when Corki shows up behind this brush, there's the ultimate, and it is a very nice ultimate and a very nice amount of poking. Corki's health drops very fast and he has to retreat, but then Shogath shows up and scares Cassiopeia away, but stands in that poison for a bit too long and starts to lose health rapidly. Cassiopeia notices that Shogath is very wounded and goes back to push him away some more, and in fact scares both Shogath and Corki away by herself, almost killing Shogath. Now again, this seems like very great gameplay by Cassiopeia, but greater yet is the purple team who noticed all of this going on. Now, if you saw Corki with this health and Shogath with this health this close to the tower while you were down here, you would not think, oh, we can gank them. But noticing that they needed a couple of more kills and needed to get the pressure back on the opponent, they still went for it. They still judged that there was a chance and they took it, and it pays off beautifully. Splitting up onto two different parts and taking both Shogath and Corki at the same time, they are able to pick up 2 kills for their team very nicely. Cassiopeia in the meanwhile escapes with Katarina right after her, Katarina really wanting to kill Cassiopeia, but failing at that. Now purple team has a chance of killing Katarina, but it doesn't work out. She escapes through all the correct routes. Now, this little bit of autopiloting can come back to haunt you after a while, because yes, you are dominating your lane quite nicely. You are getting a good amount of creep kills, more than your enemy. You have 4 kills, 0 deaths. That's looking very nice, but the problem is that if you don't pay attention to what your team is doing and trying to help your team at the same time, when you have the opportunities, well, that is an opportunity lost for your team to get some more kills. It's just as simple as that. You want to maximize the kills and creep score for the entire team, not just yourself. Now we see a bit of a fight happening here at the old town and Talon takes it. At first blue team chases off Darius, and then Cassiopeia does this little aggression against the blue team, and it is a very nice amount of aggression. That harassing poke of Cassiopeia does tons of damage. Just look at how much health Corki loses from the purple mist alone. Now, this I do not agree was a good move by Talon. He probably felt that with Cassiopeia they had a chance of killing all 3 at once, but Talon got melt very fast because of his low health. Darius chases Katarina away, leaves Shogath sandwiched between Darius and Cassiopeia, and they pick up that kill rather easily. So at least Talon's death wasn't a complete waste, but I still believe that he should have abstained from attacking in that situation. Now, when a player is autopiloting, they are very focused on themselves. Usually this that I'm seeing right now is about what they perceive in a game. Not a lot happening outside of what they can see, not a lot happening outside what they can perceive. Usually one of the symptoms of autopiloting is also that the player spends a lot of time farming when they should be out helping their team. I'm sure that you have seen this happen, where a fight is happening right in the jungle, right on the other side of the wall, and say the AD carry just continues farming, not moving to help his team. Now that can be just that he wasn't paying proper attention, or it can be that he's set in this mindset of autopiloting where he feels, well, I should only pay attention to myself, and the rest of you should just pay attention to what you are doing. Don't bother me with having to help you. You should be able to handle yourself. Well, that is not always the case in this game, because there are many situations where you should move to help your teammates. Particularly if they are characters who are not that strong early game and need some help, then it is very important that you make sure that they get to the late game without having been horribly molested by the enemy. Now Cassiopeia moves down here. I'm not entirely sure, maybe she just saw the enemies there and wanted to do some damage. And in fact does a great amount of damage with a really nice ultimate and a lot of poisoning and a lot of poking. She gets Corki down and then stays fighting Shogath there. Maybe he felt that he would have died and had no chance of escaping, but I disagree. Talon was very close. If Cassiopeia had started moving down immediately after killing Corki, Talon would have been able to intercept Shogath much earlier, and as we can see, Talon did enough damage to kill Shogath off. Talon probably would have been able to keep Cassiopeia from dying while still picking up the kill on Shogath. Darius chases Katarina away, and laning sort of resumes as it was going a moment ago. Now, autopiloting is one of the big differences between the pro players and the amateur players in this game. When you have a pro player say a tournament winner like Team Solo Mid, for example. If a lane is going horrible for one of their players, they're not just going to say, oh, well, it's that player's fault that we are going to lose the game. They are usually going to try to do something about it. For example, a lane swap or moving a jungler to a babysitting position. Sometimes it is necessary to win the game. While an autopiloting player won't really think about any of those options, he will just sort of go with what he was doing already. For example, Cassiopeia in this case is farming and attacking enemies when they are close enough. And this won't really change throughout this entire game. Now in this situation he does move down to help Talon, but that could also just have been accident because this lane was pushed very far and most players realize you shouldn't stay here if the lane is at the enemy tower and none of your teammates are nearby. I'm going to back up for a moment because something else interesting happened here, a rather beautiful team fighting scene. So yes, Team Solo Mid, for example, would probably not have a player just thinking, oh, I'm just going to farm the entire game and if every other lane fails, I'm going to keep farming. No, they would not do that. What they would probably do is alter their composition a bit. Not in champions, you can't do that in the middle of the game, but they could alter where they are placed and what their tactic is. Now, this beautiful strategy happens right here. Or not exactly strategy, but this opportunity arises. Talon gets chased away, uses ulti to escape. Cassiopeia places a lot of poison on all the enemy team members at the same time. And just look at that incredible damage Cassiopeia does. They have to flee, clearly, because Cassiopeia alone could kill the entire enemy team at this point. But for some reason decides to escape. Does a bit of poking and then runs away. But we see here that Talon is already moving towards them. Talon feels, I can maybe kill Katarina, I can maybe kill Corki, who escaped with 10 health. But gets caught in the rupture and silence of Cho'Gath and gets melted by the entire enemy team. Now, if Cassiopeia had followed right after, there would at least have been a chance that Cassiopeia could have killed all of the enemy team alone, or maybe given Talon a few kills. But again, this is what's happening when the player is autopiloting and only really caring about himself. He didn't check the minimap and he didn't see that Talon was attacking the enemy. Although this could have been miscommunication from Talon because he didn't properly warn Cassiopeia, hey, I'm going out there to kill the enemy. But as we saw earlier, even with the pinging, this Cassiopeia has difficulty sort of paying attention to what is happening everywhere in the game. The enemy team is clearly intimidated at this point. They are staying in the jungle. Not much farming happening. Katarina moving into the jungle. Corki with the escape being the one on top lane against Cassiopeia. Nothing really happening bottom lane here. The item builds for both teams are fairly standard. Katarina starting with the Hextech Revolver, as expected. Cho'Gath starting with the Catalyst, also quite common. Corki going for a Trinity Force, also quite common. Just nothing really surprising happening in the items here. This is a game largely about maneuvering and positioning, which is very fun to see. Katarina whiffs that ultimate completely, thinking, oh. Now this is what happens in the game. Purple team gets just completely devastated. Let's move back a few seconds to see how that happened. Yeah, this is a fairly standard build game. This is mostly about maneuvering and positioning, and that is always very fun to see. Now, we see Corki escape with very little health here, and Talon feels that he can go and get the assassination kill there. If Darius had moved up to maybe tank the tower and Cassiopeia had continued up there to support Talon with some damage, they probably would have done so. Now what happens is that Katarina shows up, and Talon realizes that he cannot really kill Corki, so he has to escape. Katarina, afraid that Talon may go for Corki, pulls off the ultimate, which would have hurt him if he had stayed in this area. Of course he doesn't, he flees through Cho'Gath and to his enemy team for support. Now we see some strange target priority happening there. Talon goes after Corki, Darius switches target to Corki as well and kills him with the ultimate, while we see Cassiopeia attacking Cho'Gath throughout the entire team fight. Now, this is I would say that this is pretty bad focus. Even though Darius gets a kill on Shogath, probably because of Cassiopeia's damage, you still probably would want to attack Shogath with, no, Corki with all you have first, and then start targeting, say, Katarina. Now, Katarina chases Talon all the way back to Talon's turret here, and another really nice play by Talon happens here. It seems that his team isn't communicating enough to take advantage of his very sort of agile gameplay and gank attempts, but what happens here is that he chooses to kill both himself and Katarina in this beautiful play where he first silences Katarina, who keeps running in the wrong direction for a few moments, ignites Talon, and then wisely saves her Shanpo to try and get away onto the minions, but is so wounded that the minions pick up the kill on her. Very nice play by both of them. It was a nice strategy, not leading with Shanpo, but keeping Shanpo so that she could get away from the tower. Very good strategy by Katarina, but it wasn't enough to save her. Little bit of poke harassment going on here. Darius not quite landing the spin attack. What is that spin attack called? Decimate? Yes, Decimate. Tries to pull Shogath in, doesn't quite succeed, gets some minions instead. No, just fairly standard stalemate going on here at the bottom lane. Neither play can really do a lot of damage against each other. Darius gets a few hits in, but doesn't really do a lot of damage. However, Shogath chooses to stay for a while too long and keeps getting damage from Darius and gets picked on by the ulti. Cassiopeia and Darius together melt Katarina, and then this 1 versus 1 occurs between Corki and Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia running into the bush, which really does not help against Corki as he has skill shots and this persistent cone of effect Gatling gun in front of himself that will keep hurting you even if you are out of target or cannot be targeted. Keep that in mind. It doesn't really help to run into the bush to escape Corki. Another thing that sometimes happens with players who are autopiloting is that they will fall back on certain maneuvers that they feel are effective no matter what the situation. For example, you are taking a lot of damage. Maybe you should run into the brush and get some safety there. Well, that sometimes works, but you should keep in mind if your enemy can still hit you while you are out of vision. Now, this was another little bit of a mistake from Talon, which I want to highlight so that you don't repeat his mistake in any situation. What we see here on Shogath is that his movement speed is 413, Katarina's is 395 and Talon's is 418. More movement speed than either of them. This means that Talon can escape here quite nicely, but because he stopped to do the rake to try and slow down the enemies, he got hit by Shogath's rupture and died because of that. You may also want to always keep in mind, you don't need to keep in mind all your enemies' movement speeds, but you should always keep in mind who has more movement speed than you. So that you can at least check, can I escape them or not? Now, Purple Team picked up the kill on Shogath and isolating the enemy, Corki being up there and killing Katarina first and then attacking Corki. They pick up a nice amount of kill there. Darius tries to use his little catch thing with the axe to get Corki. Corki doing some poking and he succeeds. He actually pulls Corki over and Cassiopeia helps him kill him. Quite a nice play, very risky. Darius took a lot of damage in that fight and it could have easily gone the other way. Well, I do believe that Cassiopeia probably would have killed Corki either way, but Darius could have died there. Talon in the meanwhile feels it is his duty to take the enemy altar and, well, he gets really scared by Shogath and doing some nice ultimate shenanigans there, throws Shogath off by going in the other direction and tries to do the sort of dash to the enemy shenanigan, get up behind him, running the opposite direction, but too late, gets hit by the silence. Talon has been overextending a bit too much in this game. Occasionally he has done some really nice maneuvers that sort of expected his teammates to react much faster than they did, and other times he has just been overextending himself too much. Now there's a bit of a slowdown period in the game, so let's talk some more about autopiloting, which is the theme of this game. Now, for example, this Cassiopeia may not feel that he's playing bad at all. In fact, he isn't really playing bad, he's just making some mistakes. For example, here he attacks the enemies and manages to make them run, but fails to notice that Darius showed up to attack them as in a gank. And because Cassiopeia was too far away, Darius gets picked down and killed. Now, Cassiopeia realizes that they are very vulnerable and she can get the kill, and so she uses a flash to try and catch them. The moment the enemy was weak enough for her to get a kill, she uses a flash to get to them. Now, this is pretty mean as well. Cassiopeia probably should have followed Talon, because Talon and Cassiopeia could have killed Corky quite nicely and then moved on to Katarina. In fact, Cassiopeia alone manages to kill Corky and Katarina ganging up on her at the same time. She had no reason to stay in the brush scared of Katarina, really. She should have followed Talon immediately. Now, from Cassiopeia's point of view, she has not died a lot. She has got a lot of kills, 10 kills. That's almost half the kills on her team on her alone, and she has gotten the most creep score on her team. In fact, the most creep score in the game. Superficially, it would look like she's playing very well, and this is one of the problems with autopiloting. It can make it look like you are playing really well, when actually you are making a lot of mistakes that can cost you much more than you expect. And we will get to that in a few moments when this game starts to round up towards the end and we see the turnaround start happening. Now, when you are autopiloting this way, usually what happens is that League of Legends can be a very stressful game, but it can also feel really good all throughout. Now, I'm sure that at some point you have felt, well, I want to relax, so I'm going to go into a game of League of Legends and just relax. I'm going to play comfortably. Usually when you feel that way, it's because you're planning, although subconsciously, to autopilot. You're planning to play a character you know, you want to use a build you know, you want to play a random game because you don't want to have to communicate a lot. You don't want to do the thing where you're like, attack top, gank bot, switch lanes, build this with your teammate all the time. You just sort of want to play the game, just almost hypnotic. And this is fine, you can do this in unranked games quite nicely, but the problem there is that you are usually allowing a lot of little opportunities to pass by that you shouldn't. You usually end up making a lot of little mistakes when you think that way. Now the game is lagging down a lot for a moment, so I'm going to restart the stream, just a second. Right, we are back. Not sure what happened there, but the game was paused and we shall pick up right where we left off. You probably shouldn't have to notice any difference when you watch this on YouTube later. Darius does a really nice bit of poking, a really nice ultimate, but too early. Corky had too much health and survived it, but the bleed ticks down, but leaves him with 30 HP. Again, this Corky has a lot of luck in escaping these types of ganks. Now, what was I talking about a few moments ago? Autopiloting. Yes, it can make it look like you are playing really nicely. And if you're very tired, for example, maybe you've been playing ranked games all day and you just want to wind down with a couple of casual games, you maybe don't want to play your A game all the time. You may just want to play to relax. Well, if you are feeling like you are relaxed even when playing ranked games, it probably means that you are falling into certain autopiloting traps, and you should really think about what you're doing in the game. If things seem easy in the game, if you, for example, ever felt that, oh, I no longer want to play, well, let's say Talon in this case, because I already know everything I can do with Talon. Nothing surprises me with Talon. All the games feel the same. Well, think for yourself, are you winning all those games that feel the same, or is it about 50-50? A little teamfight happens there, but it's really nothing surprising. Other than the fact that purple team loses, they get ganked by blue team and just beat in a fair up fight. Cassiopeia gets melted by the entire enemy team, and this is where the turnaround starts happening. But let's move back for a moment to what I was talking about. If you ever feel like, this champion, for example, is becoming boring because all the games feel the same, but at the same time you are losing half the games and winning half the games. Usually this is the symptom that you are autopiloting with that champion. You are playing the same way with the champion each time and not really paying attention to the things you could do differently. So of course all the games are going to feel the same. But if you're not winning all the games, then you're not doing the right thing all the time. You may be doing the same thing all the time, and your victories or losses may depend on how well that which you are doing syncs with the rest of your team. Or maybe your team isn't really supporting your playstyle well enough. In those cases, you probably should change your gameplay a little bit. You probably should try other tactics or even other builds even with that champion. There's a bit of a strange FPS thing going on with this capturing device again. I really do not know why that happens. It just seems to happen completely spontaneously and for no adequate reason. Oh, half frame rate, how annoying.
Purple team's turret has
I'm gonna have to do another cut here, just a moment. And back again. This problem seems to occur in fraps for some reason. It just slows everything down. If anyone knows what this problem is caused by, please let me know. We see Talon here horribly overextend trying to chase down Shogath and gets killed, and then the rest of purple team arrives piecemeal and gets picked down by the enemy blue team. Now we notice that the turnaround has started happening. Jesus, that's a lot of damage by Cassiopeia. Jeez, that's a lot of damage. Oh, wow.
double kill.
Even after Cassiopeia is killed, she manages to take down Corki just by the poison. Cassiopeia does hideous amounts of damage in this game, just enormous amounts of damage. So from his perspective, he may be playing really well, but all of a sudden we see this strange thing happening where blue team is suddenly winning the team fights. What changed? Well, it seems that Shogath has gotten his core items up first of all. It seems that Katarina definitely has gotten the core items up and a giant's belt. Her health has been boosted up nicely. Corki has definitely got the core items up. He has the Trinity Force and the Lord Van Damme's Pillager and a Black Cleaver even. Now the enemy is no longer sort of lagging behind. Now the enemy is on equal terms with the purple team. Darius also seems to be doing very nice with his items. He has a lot of them. Cassiopeia has the core items. Talon, on the other hand, is lagging behind a lot. Even in level, Talon is incredibly weak. All of a sudden we see that there is this weakness in the purple team. And what did we see earlier in the game? Cassiopeia letting a Shogath go that Talon was chasing. Cassiopeia not supporting Talon when he was attacking a team fight. Talon Talon going around the enemy to kill Corki at that one turret, but Cassiopeia not following to pick up the kill safer. Talon getting chased by the enemy team and Cassiopeia just sort of letting him go and then moving him afterwards to take the kills herself. In a lot of situations in this game we have seen Talon go for these sort of ganks that Talon needs to get those kills, needs to get his character stronger, and Cassiopeia not properly supporting him. And this is really starting to bite them in the ass at this point, because if you are this Cassiopeia player and you're only focusing on yourself, you should be thinking, or you would be thinking, oh, everything is going great, I have great kills, great creep score, I was killing them a moment ago, let's try it again. Oh my god, where did that damage come from? Oh dear god. All of a sudden everything is a nightmare, you're dying horribly to the enemy. Talon goes in to desperately get a kill on Corki, succeeds, but gets picked off by Shogath, so it's a 1-for-3 exchange. Horrible. All of a sudden we see this very annoying thing that can happen if you are autopiloting and not noticing it. You don't support your team properly. You sort of miss these little things that have to do with the other members of your team because you're too focused on yourself. And all of a sudden you have this great glaring weakness in your team that the enemy can exploit. Because yes, Darius does a ton of damage, and yes, Cassiopeia does a ton of damage, but with one of their members being essentially useless in a team fight, Purple team really had nothing more they could do, and they realize that they are terribly outclassed in this point and just give up the game and surrender. I do not agree with this decision to surrender. I think they could have turned it around if they had spent some time just feeding up Talon, giving him the jungle, giving him some creep farm, shoring up his strength essentially, making him stronger again. But this is what can happen when you're sort of stuck in this mindset of only caring about yourself. You miss that one of your teammates may become horribly weak and you're not doing the correct things to strengthen him up. It's very sad to see this happen, and I can guarantee you it would never happen in a tournament game. When someone in a tournament becomes weakened, you don't just say, "Oh, your default, we lost. Better surrender the game." No, you would probably do something to try and pump him back up to the same level as the other players. Now that was game number 1, and we will take a short break before moving on to game number 2.